Okay, 3.4 day 3, we're going to review all the methods for solving quadratics that we've learned. Sometimes more than one method will work. Sometimes one method will be easier than another method. So we're going to review them, and then in the practice section, you will decide which method is the best in which situation. Okay, so the first method we learned was factoring. When we do factoring, remember it does have to equal to 0 before we factor. It has to be in standard form. And factoring only works some of the time. So let's try this one. This is x squared. So it must be x times x. What do we times to get negative 21? Probably 7 times 3. And to make it add up to positive 4, it must be plus 7 and minus 3. And then my answers are x equals negative 7 and x equals positive 3. So if it factors, it's normally pretty quick to solve, and you'll always get a rational answer. Okay, let's try B. Same thing, first make sure it's in standard form. It does equal to 0. So I can go ahead and try to factor it. It might not work, and if it doesn't work, I'll have to use a different method. Since this is 2x squared, it's got to be 2x times x. Okay, and then what's the last one? 7. So it's either got to be 7 times 1 or 1 times 7. If I do 7 times 1, that's 2x squared, 2x and 7x. That doesn't work. That makes 9x. Let me try 1 and 7. 1, 7. Does that work? 2x squared, 14x plus 1x. That's 15. And it's got to be a minus and a minus. I can still solve it in my head if I would like. For 2x minus 1 equals 0, I would plus 1 and divide by 2. That's positive 1 over 2. And then for x minus 7, I would plus 7. And I get x equals positive 7. Okay, so factoring is a great method because it's fast, but it only works when your answers are rational like these ones. Okay, method 2 was solving square root. Okay, solving using square root still only works some of the time. It only works when you can isolate the x squared. So for this one, I could not solve using square root because that weird 4x is in the way. But for this one, I can solve using square root. Okay, look and see what is being squared so you can isolate it. In this case, I see it's x squared. So I'm going to get that by itself. So what am I going to do? I'm going to plus the 11 over. So I have 9x squared equals 16. Divide by 9. 16 divided by 9 is a fraction. Okay, now that the x squared is isolated, I can square root. And since it's quadratic, I should get 2 answers. So I'm going to get a positive and a negative. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 9 is 3. So this is actually rational, which means I probably could have factored it. But in this case, square root worked pretty well. Okay, let's look at B. For B, I'm also going to solve using square root. First, see what is being squared. In this case, I see that this whole thing is being squared. Since the whole thing's being squared, I can go ahead and use square root now. The square root and the squared cancel, so 3x minus 7 equals, I should get 2 answers, a positive and a negative. The square root of 4 is 2. Let's go ahead and solve this. I'm going to add the 7 over. 3x, 2 plus 7 is 9. Negative 2 plus 7 is 5. Let's go ahead and divide by 3. So I get x equals 9 divided by 3 is 3. 5 divided by 3 is 5/3. Okay, and these happen to be rational answers, but they don't have to be rational answers for square root. Okay, the third method we learned was completing the square. Okay, completing the square, I like to think of it as filling in the blank. So I have x squared plus 4x, and I want there to be a blank here. So let me bring down the x squared plus the 4x equals, I need a blank there, but the 13 is there, so let me minus the 13. So that's negative 13. Okay, now when I complete this square, I want this to be x squared, so I don't have to divide by anything. This works a lot easier when this is even, because I have to divide it by 2 before I complete the square. Okay, so if I do 4 divided by 2, I get 2. 2 times 2 is 4, so I'm going to plus 4 on the left and the right. Okay, and then remember the point of completing the square so I can make it into something squared equals negative 9. What is that? X plus 2. Okay, once it looks like this, I can go ahead and square root it. I'm going to copy this step just for notes. You would probably square root it right there. And then it looks like a square root problem. So x plus 2 equals, the square root of 9, negative 9 is imaginary, so plus or minus 3i. If I minus the 2 over, I get x equals minus 2 plus or minus 3i. And that's a nice answer in standard form. Okay, now the last method we learned was quadratic formula. The nice thing about quadratic formula is it actually works always, no matter what. Okay. Now before I start it, let me put it in standard form, which means I need a 0 on the, well, actually on one side. So I'm going to move the 3x over. Okay, and then rewrite it in standard form before you apply the quadratic formula. Minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, now quadratic formula. X equals negative b. So negative 3 is positive 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and then go ahead and simplify it. Since this always works, we sometimes get rational, irrational, imaginary. We could get any kind of answer, which is why it's actually great. Oh shoot, the bottom should be 2a, so that's a 5. So let's make 2 times 5, let's make this a 10. Okay, what is that? 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 11, which I'm not going to panic about because we're doing imaginary numbers this unit. Let's see. 3 plus or minus, it's going to be imaginary. The square root of 11 is irrational. So I'm going to leave it as imaginary square root of 11 over 10. And that represents two answers. One is 3 plus the imaginary square root of 11, the whole thing over 10, and 3 minus the imaginary square root of 11, the whole thing over 10. Okay, now for the practice yourself using any method, which means your method could be different than my method, but we should get the same answers no matter what, as long as we leave our answers in simplest form. Go ahead and try them. Unpause as you're ready to check. Okay, for number 1, 2, Okay, check your answers really carefully, and remember, you could have a different method as mine. As long as you simplify your answer, our actual answer should match.